Welcome to my review of the XK-P200 dual pack photography lights. These are 12-inch LED panels which have bicolored LED diode elements within them, providing either warm yellow light or bright white lights, and come included with extensible and adjustable photography light stands which have standard type quarter-inch screw thread mounts. We'll take a look at that further, as well as they don't power using USB, but instead a DC barrel jack, which is kind of a unique thing about these lights. So the first thing I do want to mention is that it does come with two of these DC wall adapters, but they aren't certified, which is kind of a huge downside right at the start. They do output at 15 volt 3 amps, but again, there are no markings. There's only FCC and CE, but there's no markings for UL or ETL listed. So that is something that I'm going to have to think about when I leave these plugged in, is that you probably can't rely on them too much because, again, they are not certified. The build quality of these light panels is actually pretty surprisingly good. They are made out of plastic, but do have a metal heat plate on the inside. On its front, the diffuser is pretty transparent. That is something that I don't particularly like, that it is not a full opaque diffuser, but you can see the LED diodes through it. So I'll have to take a look once I plug it in how well it actually diffuses the light, because again, it is very slim plastic that just slides into the notches on all the sides of the LED panel. And again, if we look at the back of the light itself, the build quality again is pretty nice and strong because it has that rigid heat shielding on the inside. There is no fan. That is a bit of a downside. I would have loved to seen if they had put a what looks to be a 50 millimeter or 60 millimeter fan within the cavity there, but again, there isn't one. There is just the space for one, but I don't think you can actually install a fan, but that's just how it comes with, and it's passively cool, but you can see that metal heat shielding on the inner of the LED elements, so that is really nice that it ventilates pretty much across the entirety of the LED panel. And that's quite important because these P200 lights, 25 watts, that is pretty high power, and it does mention CRI of more than 95, but once I plug it in, I'll be able to see whether it washes out the colors or if it actually enhances and makes the colors look vibrant and pop out. And that's kind of what's important about these particular light panels. These lights do mount on a quarter-inch standard tripod screw, so you can pretty much put these onto any kind of tripod, but they do come with light stands that have that quarter-inch screw at the top of it. Taking a closer look at the controller module itself, it is very simple to use because all it has is that power on-off switch in the center there, as well as brightness increase and decrease. It is very, very standard, and there is no timer function. There is no any kind of other special feature about it. It's just being able to adjust the brightness as well as the mode switch for toggling between the two different types of LEDs that it has for the color temperature that can be adjusted. There is no flexibility for individual increments for that color temperature. It's just whether or not you turn on or off the different colored LEDs. Here's kind of what I was talking about earlier, is that it does come with a standard style of a light stand. It doesn't have a light stand adapter, but instead uses a quarter-inch top-mounted screw thread, which is really nice to see that this can be a lot more versatile. If you're not plugging in the lights on top of these, you can still make use out of this light stand, but it is pretty solid, even though these are aluminum tubes. But opened up, this is kind of what it looks like. Again, I don't like to see this type of mechanism. It's pretty common on light stands, but again, you have to be very careful opening and closing it because of those sharp edges along. And these light stands are pretty tall. In fact, that's kind of why you have such a steep angle on its legs. And that's something I haven't really seen too much, but that angle is pretty steep. These legs, once you fully open them up, 16 inches of how much fanning out that these legs do, and they are quite tall. So I'm going to have to zoom out a little bit in order to be able to get this into focus here. But and again, these light stands are adjustable using the multiple plastic thumb tightening knobs at the top, as well as it's not a ball head, but rather a simple mechanism for just the vertical adjustment of the tripod screw, but you can rotate it around into other directions as a workaround to that lack of ball head at the top. So I just plugged in one of these LED light panels, and they do get very, very bright because of that 25 watt power output through that 15 volt 3 amps that the power bricks can provide. So if we power on one of these lights, and by default it does turn on to its bright white color mode at 8500 Kelvin. But if we switch over to some of the other modes, you'll notice that now. And so zooming in, here's all the different modes that I'm going to cycle through. This is the medium warm color mode, so that it has all of the LED elements. And again, you can adjust the brightness, which gets very, very bright because of these panels do take that 25 watt power output. And here is the bright white color mode as well as the yellow color mode. So there is the three different modes, and it's not individually incrementable between the different color temperatures, but each of these panels has about 352 individual LED elements within them, 176 of which are white colored in this particular mode. And same thing when you switch over to the yellow color mode. And finally, all 352 LED elements illuminated in the dual color sequence, which has a medium warm temperature. Again, that range does vary between 2500 and 8500 Kelvin, which is a pretty large spectrum when you think about how yellow that these lights can get, and then how white colored output that these do provide. That diffuser panel does a pretty good job. Again, you have to get the light in just the right angle to be able to minimize the shadows, but it is slightly on the smaller side. I'm not noticing that the lights are getting too hot or anything like that. They are pretty cool. In fact, at the maximum power setting, only the front of the LED elements, which is expected, are slightly warm to the touch, but the rear, thanks to that metal shielding at the back that is dissipating all of that heat at its maximum power temperature. And taking a further look at the shadows being cast by the light panels, it's not too big. Again, they are pretty soft, but I think that the diffusers are slightly limited. You do have to get, this is kind of about 6 feet away from the light source, and you'll notice that the shadows are generally minimized. But if you use two of these in sequence, you can further eliminate a lot of those shadows. And this is kind of literally about 30 centimeters away. So overall, these light panels do a pretty bright job in illuminating large areas, and they are color adjustable. So if we switch to different color modes, you'll start to see how that sort of impacts the picture quality. This is the medium color mode with all the LED elements illuminated. This is the bright white 8500 Kelvin mode, and the 2500K mode at much more warm temperature. Again, that's a bit of a downside in terms of the lack of adjustability between the different modes. So most often I am going to keep it in the middle mode or that bright white mode, because it is a pretty large range that these LEDs go across. Here's another look with that diffuser panel pulled out. It is in there firmly, but you can pull it out from the sliding slides at the side of it. And here's all the individual LED beads. If we take a closer look, you'll notice that they are wired onto the PCB. Zooming in, you'll see that these are wired right onto the PCB, and they have that bicolor sequence there. On the bottom side, where the connector is coming, the soldering job that they did was pretty good. In fact, I'm seeing a little bit of residue, but other than that, these are quite well constructed. Here's how both of these look plugged in. They are very, very bright. In fact, I don't think I would be able to use these for things like vlogging or for live meetings because of how bright these get. And they are better suited for tasks and doing photography for like creative shots, and when you need that bicolor mode, or between switching over to doing. So overall, I'm quite happy with these 2-pack XK P200 LED light panels, which are 12 inches and have bicolor modes and output quite brightly in illuminating pretty large spaces. But the only downsides I really came across for these panels was that they don't have a particularly dense diffuser. If you look at them closely, they are very translucent and don't particularly diffuse the light too well as power adapters, which aren't certified, so that is a bit of a huge downside when it comes to running these for long periods of time. Other than that, they are pretty bright lights and have really sturdy light stands that fold out with adjustability both horizontally and vertically, and the versatility of just being able to use standard 1/4-inch style screw threads to mount these light panels underneath.